I never thought humiliation could come wrapped in silk and champagne. There I was, sitting in the third row at my younger sister's wedding, wearing the only formal dress I owned, trying my best to blend into a room full of people who all seemed too polished, too perfect. My son, Luca, sat beside me, swinging his legs under the table, wearing a little suit I had to stretch 2 paychecks for. He looked so proud to be there. He thought this day would make us feel like part of the family again. Maybe I hoped that too. Vivienne, my sister, floated through the day like a movie star. She always had that energy. Beautiful, charming, adored by everyone, especially our mother. She got the compliments. I got the comparisons. She got the spotlight. I learned how to live in the shadows. Still, I showed up. I smiled. I clapped when they kissed. I kept my voice steady when people asked. "And you're the older sister. You don't look like you have an 8-year-old. Then came the speeches. The groom's best friend went first. Some mildly funny anecdotes, light laughter. Then it was Vivienne's turn. I expected something sentimental, something about love, maybe something about growing up together. I even raised my glass in anticipation. I should have known better. She lifted her crystal flute and smiled out over the room. "I want to thank everyone for coming," she began, glowing. "It means the world to have you here. And of course, I want to say something special about my big sister, Alara." I turned to Luca and smiled at him. He looked up at me with excitement. For a moment, I believed she was about to say something kind. Vivienne went on. "Alara's been such a role model. She's a single mom, strong, independent, and clearly unwanted by anyone else." The room erupted into laughter. My stomach flipped. I thought I misheard her, but she kept smiling like it was the most charming joke she'd ever told. Some guests looked confused, but most laughed harder, clinking their glasses like it was all in good fun. I didn't know where to look. My heart pounded in my ears. Luca tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Why did she say that about you, Mama?" Before I could answer, my mother added loudly from her table, not missing a beat. "She's a used product. But hey, she still looks good for her age." More laughter, sharper this time. It was the kind of laughter that cuts through skin, the kind that lets you know everyone sees you differently now. Not as a guest, not as family, as entertainment, as pity, as shame. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My face burned, but I refused to let the tears fall. Not in front of my son, not in front of them. My fingers curled into my napkin under the table, gripping it like a rope. I looked around the room, searching for someone, anyone, who might meet my eyes and offer something resembling compassion. My grandfather looked down at his plate. My cousin smirked at her phone. Even my uncle, who once told me I reminded him of my late father, didn't look up. Luca looked lost. His little eyebrows furrowed, confused and hurt. That was the part that broke me. Not the words, not the laughter, not the shame. The fact that my son was watching it all, trying to understand why his mother, the woman who kissed his scraped knees and stayed up late helping with his math homework, was being mocked by her own family. I wanted to leave. I wanted to grab Luca's hand, walk out, and never look back. But something in me hesitated. I wanted to speak. I wanted to defend myself, to tell them they didn't know half of what I've carried, what I've survived. But my mouth was dry. My legs were trembling under the table. Then, before I could move, I heard a chair scrape back. Callum, the groom, Vivienne's perfect polished fiancé, stood up slowly. He didn't look amused. He didn't look at Vivienne. He didn't look at the guests. His eyes went straight to me, and something in his face made the entire room freeze. In that instant, I knew something was about to happen. Not a rescue, not a fight, a reckoning. People often think being the older sibling means you lead the way that you're looked up to. But in our family, I was more of a warning than a role model. I'm Alara. I'm 34, a single mom, and the black sheep of the family. I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town with my son, Luca. He's 8, the best thing that ever happened to me, and the only reason I ever walk back into rooms that once made me feel small. I work 2 jobs, mornings at a local cafe, nights at a front desk for a small hotel. Life isn't glamorous, but it's mine. I make Luca pancakes on Saturdays. I know how to sew patches into his jeans, and he tells me I'm his superhero. That's all I need to keep going. But being a single mom in my family meant I was the one who failed. My mother, Judith, made sure I felt it at every holiday dinner. She believes in appearances. That's why she tells people Vivian's wedding is a second chance for the family name. Vivian is 5 years younger than me. She's beautiful, successful, always had everything handed to her. And always knew how to make it look like she earned it. She's the golden child. Judith adores her. If Vivian sneezed, our mother would bless her with a silk handkerchief. If I got sick, she told me to take vitamins and stop being dramatic. When I got pregnant with Luca, everything changed. I was 25, newly in love with a man who swore he'd stand by me. By month 5, he vanished. No note, no explanation. Just gone. My family didn't ask questions. They didn't offer help. They gave me silence, judgment, and I told you so. But I had Luca, and when I held him for the first time, every cruel word they ever said became white noise. Still, deep down, I hoped they'd eventually see me, not just as a single mom, but as someone worth loving. Maybe that's why when I got Vivian's wedding invitation, I said yes, even though I wasn't part of the bridal party, even though my name was spelled wrong on the RSVP card. Even though I had to rent my dress and do my own hair in the bathroom mirror while Luca practiced smiling in his little tie, I told myself it was foreclosure that maybe, just maybe, this was my family's way of extending a quiet olive branch. The venue was beautiful, white roses everywhere, gold-accented tableware, a string quartet playing in the distance. Vivian looked like she belonged in a bridal magazine. She was all smiles and sparkle, basking in every compliment and camera flash. When she passed me, her smile faltered. "You made it," she said, like she hadn't expected me to. She looked down at Luca and added, "He's getting big." No hug, no warmth, just small talk. Then back to the spotlight. Judith didn't acknowledge me at all. She walked past me like I was one of the servers, but Luca was glowing. He thought the chandelier looked like a spaceship. He whispered that Vivian looked like a princess. And when I saw how happy he was just being there, I decided to stay for the reception, even though I could feel that familiar ache of not belonging settle in my chest. I found our table, table 9 near the back by the restrooms. I laughed to myself. Fitting. We ate our salads. I helped Luca with his tie when he got chocolate mousse on it. I avoided eye contact with my mother and tried not to listen when I heard my name whispered across clinking glasses. Then the speeches started and I realized this night wasn't going to be about family unity or forgiveness. It was going to be another stage for Vivian to shine, and I was about to become her punchline. It started the way most wedding speeches do. Warm, sugary, just a touch over-rehearsed. Vivian stood up with perfect posture, holding a champagne flute in her freshly manicured hand. Her dress shimmered under the reception lights, and the room instantly hushed in anticipation. She smiled, pausing just long enough for everyone to settle. "I want to thank all of you for being here," she began. "It's the happiest day of my life, and I'm surrounded by the people who mean everything to me." I watched from the back table, trying to convince myself that I was included in that sentence. Luca was perched on the edge of his chair beside me, kicking his legs, completely enchanted by the whole fairy tale of it. Vivian continued, speaking sweetly about her new husband, Callum, about love, timing, and fate. I relaxed a little. Maybe, just maybe, this speech wouldn't turn into something cruel. Then she shifted. "And of course," she said with a sly smile, "I want to give a shout out to my big sister, Alara. You've always been such a strong example." The spotlight moved. I could feel eyes turning toward me. I sat up a little straighter. I smiled politely. Vivian continued, her voice light but pointed. "She's the bravest woman I know. She raised a child on her own. No husband, no partner, just her. And well, whoever was kind enough to babysit." The room chuckled. My stomach tightened. "But seriously," she added, "it's incredible how she's managed. A single mom, unwanted by anyone, but still showing up." Laughter. Real, loud, unfiltered laughter. I felt the breath leave my body. My cheeks flushed hot. My hands froze around the napkin in my lap. I glanced at Luca. He was frowning, confused, glancing around like he was trying to understand why people were laughing at his mom. Then came the worst part. My mother, Judith, laughed louder than anyone. She leaned toward her table mates and added, just loud enough to carry, she's a used product, but she still polishes up well. Another wave of laughter, the kind that didn't even try to hide its cruelty. My vision blurred for a second. It felt like being slapped, except no one had touched me. Everyone just laughed around me like it was normal, like it was acceptable to mock a woman who had spent nearly a decade working herself to the bone to raise her son with dignity and warmth, like being alone made me less. I looked down at Luca. His smile had vanished. He leaned into me, whispering, "Why did she say that? What does she mean?" I wanted to answer, but I couldn't find the words. I couldn't protect him from this moment. I couldn't shield him from the way our family saw me. That kind of pain doesn't hide well. My heart raced. I looked around the room for an exit, for someone who might step in, someone who might say enough. But no one did. Some people looked uncomfortable, but they didn't speak. They just looked at their glasses, their plates, their phones. Even Grandpa Norman, who used to call me his little lion when I was a kid, avoided my gaze. He was there. But in that moment, he wasn't with me. I was alone again. The thing is, I could have taken it if it were just me. I've spent years swallowing that kind of treatment. I could have smiled, taken Luca by the hand, and left quietly with my head held high. But seeing the confusion in my son's eyes, seeing him trying to understand why the people clapping and toasting were suddenly laughing at his mother, it cracked something open in me. I stood. Not because I knew what I was going to say. Not because I wanted to make a scene. I just needed to get out of that room. I needed air. I needed to breathe without choking on the shame they were handing me. I pushed my chair back, my hands trembling. And then from the head table, another chair scraped against the floor. Callum, the groom, stood up. He looked pale. His jaw was tight. He took the microphone from Vivian without asking. The room went silent. It was like the temperature dropped. No more laughter. No more whispers, just this stillness. And I knew whatever came next wasn't part of the plan. Callum stood with one hand still resting on the table and the other clutching the microphone. His eyes were locked on me. Not on Vivian, not on Judith, not on the laughing crowd, but on me. For a second, I thought maybe he'd make another joke, smooth things over, say something charming to diffuse the tension. That's what people usually do in my family. Brush it under the rug. Pretend it didn't happen. Call it humor. Call it tradition. But that's not what he did. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. His face was tight with something I couldn't quite read. Anger, maybe, but deeper, like disappointment mixed with disbelief. Before he could speak, I pushed my chair in and reached for Luca's hand. I was ready to leave quietly, with grace. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry or break. I'd done it before. I could do it again. But as I turned to step away, Callum's voice rang out. Low, firm, calm. Ilara, don't go. That stopped me. Everyone turned toward him. Whispers swept the tables like a breeze through dry leaves. Vivian stiffened. Judith narrowed her eyes. The DJ reached toward the volume controls, but stopped when Callum raised a hand. He didn't look at anyone but me. I can't pretend I'm okay with what just happened, he said. I won't stand up here and let that kind of cruelty pass as comedy. The room held its breath. Callum stepped out from behind the table and slowly walked forward. He wasn't rushing. Every step seemed deliberate, like he was pushing through the weight of the room. He stopped near our table, me, Luca, the now cold salad plates, and looked directly at the guests. I've heard a lot about family over the past year while planning this wedding, he said, about appearances. Tradition, loyalty. But what I just saw wasn't family. That was mockery dressed up as celebration. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some people glanced at Judith, others stared at their drinks, but no one spoke. He turned to Vivian. You mocked your sister for being a single mother, for raising a child without help. You laughed, and worse, you made her son watch it happen. Vivian opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Callum didn't wait for her to answer. She didn't ask to be put in that position, but she did it. She showed up today. She sat in the back. She smiled. She brought her son to witness your big day. And you turned that into a joke? I had never seen Vivian look small until that moment. Callum turned again to the room. Alara didn't stand here to defend herself. She didn't ask for sympathy. She's never needed a stage, but I won't stay silent. Because if I'm about to marry into a family that sees cruelty as humor and shame as tradition, then I need to reconsider what kind of man I want to be. A gasp rippled through the guests. A woman at the next table whispered, "Is this real?" Someone dropped a fork. Luca looked up at me with wide eyes. I didn't know what to do. I'd come here expecting to survive the evening. I didn't expect to be defended. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. Callum looked down at my son and gave him the softest nod. Your mom's the strongest person in this room. Don't forget that. He turned back to the crowd one last time. I think I've seen enough. With that, he set the microphone down, walked past Vivienne without another glance, and headed straight out the door. I stood there, frozen, holding Luca's hand. The music didn't start. The crowd didn't move. It was as if someone had drained all the air out of the room. The fairy tale had shattered, but for the first time in a long time. I wasn't the one left broken. The moment Callum walked out of the reception hall, it was like someone had flipped a switch. No one clapped. No one cheered. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning and the clink of a single spoon hitting a glass. The crowd was frozen, eyes darting between me, Vivian and the door Callum had just disappeared through. Vivian stood at the head table like she'd just been slapped. Her perfect posture cracked. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of what had just happened. She looked around, but the faces staring back at her weren't smiling anymore. Some looked shocked. Some looked embarrassed. A few looked angry. Not at Callum, but at her. Judith was the first to speak. She stood abruptly, her chair screeching back across the polished floor. What an ungrateful boy, she snapped. He embarrassed you in front of everyone. Typical, just like your sister. Selfish. But her voice didn't carry like it usually did. The power she held over the room had vanished. Her words fell flat. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like shrinking under her voice. I turned to Luca. He looked up at me, unsure. Are we leaving? He asked quietly. Yes, baby, I said, brushing his hair back. We're going home. I stood tall as I took his hand and began walking toward the exit. People parted as I passed. Some avoided my eyes. Others looked like they wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Halfway to the door, I heard someone call my name, Ilara. I turned. It was my grandfather, Norman, pale, eyes rimmed red. He stood slowly and stepped toward me. I'm sorry, he said, his voice soft, shaky. I should have stopped it years ago. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I didn't hate him for not defending me. I understood what silence cost some people. I'd lived it. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't carrying their guilt anymore either. Outside, the air was cool and crisp. Luca squeezed my hand. Is the wedding over? I looked down at him. Yeah, I said, smiling. I think it ended exactly how it needed to. We drove home in silence, the radio off, just the hum of the tires and the rhythm of Luca tapping his fingers on the armrest. I tucked him in that night, kissed his forehead, and lingered by his door a little longer than usual. He didn't ask any more questions. He didn't need to. The next morning I woke up to a dozen missed calls from unknown numbers, distant cousins, even a couple of guests I barely knew. I ignored them all. My phone buzzed again. A text from a friend who had been at the wedding. Someone recorded Callum's speech. It's on Facebook. Over 50,000 views already. You need to see the comments. People are standing up for you. I opened the video. There it was. Callum's voice, calm and direct, standing up to an entire room. And there I was, frozen in the frame, holding Luca's hand. The comments were full of support. This man is a hero. She deserved better. I'm crying watching this. Every single mom out there just got a little bit of justice. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just felt still, like something that had been clenching inside me for years. had finally let go that week. Vivian tried to spin the story. She said Callum overreacted, that it was just a joke, that people were too sensitive. But the truth had already landed and no one was laughing anymore. A few days later, a small bouquet of wildflowers showed up at my apartment. No note, just a little card that read to the lioness. I didn't need to ask who it was from. The wedding didn't happen, but something more important did. For once, I wasn't the one carrying the shame. I wasn't the one who had to apologize. I walked out of that room with my son, my dignity, and my head held high. And somewhere out there, someone reminded a room full of people and maybe the whole internet what it really means to be strong. It's been 6 months since the wedding that never happened. Vivian and Callum officially called off the engagement. There was number statement, no drama, no follow-up post, just a quiet erasure of what was supposed to be a perfect day. Vivian returned to her social circle like nothing had happened. The pictures from that night disappeared from her feed. She hasn't reached out to me. I'm not sure I expected her to. Judith called once, not to apologize, but to say I had embarrassed the family by not laughing along. I listened for exactly 30 seconds, then told her something I never thought I'd have the strength to say. I'm not your scapegoat anymore. Then I hung up. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was clean, simple, final. I realized after everything, I didn't need a grand apology from my family. I didn't need them to suddenly change or recognize my worth. I just needed to stop waiting for their permission to see it in myself. My life didn't transform overnight. I still work long hours. I still make 2 dinners some nights because Luca wants pancakes and I want something green. But I carry myself differently now. I'm not hunched under years of quiet shame. I don't hide in the back of rooms anymore. Luca's changed, too. He asks more questions now, smart ones. He wants to know why some people are cruel and why others are brave. He talks about Callum like he's a Marvel hero. Sometimes he pretends to give speeches with his action figures, standing up for the little guy. I watch him, and I know deep in my bones that he saw something that night that will shape the kind of man he'll become. Strong, gentle, unafraid to speak when it counts. One night, while we were brushing our teeth, Luca looked up at me in the mirror and asked, "Mom, are you still sad about what Aunt Vivian said?" I paused, then said not anymore. Why? He shrugged, toothpaste on his chin. Because I think you won, even though it wasn't a fight. That stayed with me because he was right. I didn't yell. I didn't insult anyone back. I didn't demand justice or cry in public or make a scene. I simply stood up, held my son's hand and walked away. And someone else, someone unexpected, decided that silence wasn't good enough anymore. Callum didn't just stand up for me. He reminded everyone in that room what love actually looks like. Not the kind that wears a tuxedo or walks down the aisle, the kind that sees someone being hurt and says no, not today. If I've learned anything, it's this. Being alone doesn't mean you're unwanted. Being kind doesn't make you weak. And dignity, once reclaimed, is something no one can take from you again. So no, I didn't dance at my sister's wedding. I didn't toast or toss a bouquet or cry happy tears under fairy lights. But I did leave with something better than approval. I left with my head high, my son beside me, and the deep, quiet certainty that I no longer need to explain myself to anyone. That is the ending no one expected, and exactly the one I deserved. If this story moved you, if you've ever been made to feel small or silenced in a room full of people who should have stood by you, know this. Your voice matters, your dignity matters, and you are not alone. If you found strength in this story, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. I'd love to know, have you ever experienced a moment where someone finally stood up for you or where you had to stand up for yourself? And if you want more true stories that cut deep, challenge expectations, and remind us what it means to be human, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for being here. And remember, your story is powerful, even if no one claps when you tell it.